And we start today in Asia. China is flexing its military power once again. Chinese President Xi Jinping said he's ready to use military force to reunite Taiwan if need be. RT's Sarah Montes de Oca joins me. Sarah, what is the latest?
Well, Steve, it looks like a more confident China is threatening to use military force in Taiwan while urging the Taiwanese to accept reunification with China.
We will not rule out the use of force and will reserve all options of necessary measures.
These threats come as Washington and Beijing remain in tense trade talks. Experts are warning that the increase of military presence from both sides in the South China Sea could spark a greater conflict than just trade tariffs between the two superpowers. It looks like both countries are doing just that. The Pentagon is now urging America's Pacific Rim allies to also increase their military presence in the South China Sea to confront China. And Beijing revealed that its top military priority for 2019 includes strengthening training and preparing for war. The Pentagon's Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and the Pacific Affairs said that other U.S. allies, including Britain, France, and Canada, have already boosted their military presence in the South China Sea. Most recently, in late December, Chinese Admiral Luo Yuan said that his country's military is capable of sinking 2 American aircraft carriers and killing 10,000 American sailors. Now, the admiral said that what the U.S. fears most is casualties. We'll see how frightened America is. Let's not forget that back in October, Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the just retired commander of the U.S. Army in Europe, suggested that the conflict between the superpowers would come soon. In a statement, he said, "I think in 15 years it's not inevitable, but it is a very strong likelihood that we will be at war with China." And Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan told top Pentagon officials to remain focused on ongoing operations, but to remember, China, China, China. Now, this was Shanahan's first meeting after taking over the former Defense Secretary Jim Mattis. So despite the leadership change at the Pentagon, it seems like the U.S. will be sticking to the same strategy, which was written by Mattis and describes China as predatory and a hostile power. Now, the plan states that long-term strategic competitions with China and Russia are the principal priorities for the department and require both increased and sustained investment. Steve, well, at this moment, it's still largely rhetoric. The prospect of these two superpowers at war is an outcome that both militaries appear to actively be preparing for.
Well, that would be a very serious development, obviously. But the United States took some action today, thankfully not militarily, where they issued a warning to American citizens.
That's right. So the U.S. State Department actually issued a level 2 warning for those Americans traveling to China to be cautious, to proceed with increased caution. This because Chinese authorities are capable of preventing them from returning to U.S. citizens, sometimes without cause and sometimes for years. So there is a level 2 warning now. A
warning to be taken seriously. Thank you, Sarah. For more, we're joined by our guest, Surabh Gupta, Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist at the Institute for China-America Studies. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, so how serious is this latest round of rhetoric from China regarding its claim on Taiwan and the threat of force? Our new acting Secretary of Defense has reportedly told leaders at the Pentagon, as Sarah mentioned, focus on China, China, China. Is he right?
Well, the National Defense Strategy and the National Security Strategy did focus very significantly on China and Russia. So, and Secretary Mattis, too, had been very focused, of course, on China, even though he maintained a policy of engaging China in military-to-military dialogue. So as long as the two countries continue to maintain their dialogue schedule, I wouldn't be too concerned, even though the ratcheting up of the rhetoric does leave some scope for apprehension on all sides, frankly.
So last month, a Chinese admiral threatened to sink U.S. aircraft carriers that were operating in the East and South China Seas and presumably the Taiwan Strait. A great op-ed today in thehill.com by Joseph Bosco. He says that as China closes the military gap with the United States, that their threats get bolder. So could these threats be getting closer to actually becoming a reality at the same time?
Not exactly. I know there are very serious threats, and we must get ready to face up to the next 10, 15, perhaps next 2 or 3 decades of very serious military and maritime competition in the Asia-Pacific, particularly in the Western Pacific. The Chinese are determined to create an anti-access, anti-denial bubble along their periphery. Their periphery means the first island chain, the islands of Japan, Philippines, and Taiwan, and thereafter push that bubble, anti-access bubble, even further out towards the middle of the Western Pacific. This competition will go on for the next 10, 15 years. We might have some crises, contingencies, but I think we must settle in for the long term of this sort of competition, and it doesn't necessarily have to get out of hand and create a hot kinetic conflict.
Well, sir, let me ask you, what exactly is U.S. policy? Is it unambiguous defense of Taiwan? Or, would it depend on the circumstances, as former Assistant Defense Secretary Joseph Nye said during the missile crisis with China back in 1995?
It will depend on the circumstances. That's just the way it is. The way the Taiwan Relations Act is written, which is seen as the basis for U.S. action to come to the defense of Taiwan, has a fair degree of ambiguity. It is not like your security treaties that are there with Japan and with other countries. And so there is a degree of ambiguity. But can I just go back to one point earlier?
Sure,
this is with regard to President Xi's speech. I know it just came out of the blue for most people on January 1st, suddenly such strong words against Taiwan. But let me provide a little bit of a context out here. This speech was made on the 40th anniversary of the speech by the National People's Congress Standing Committee to compatriots in Taiwan. That speech happened at the time of normalization of relations with the U.S.-China relations, and Taiwan was still remained somewhat an unresolved affair at that point of time. That speech 40 years back was seen as a harbinger of the two sides, that is China and Taiwan, moving away from military confrontation and lobbing military insults at each other to opening the path to peaceful reunification.
Right.
Now, President Xi provided that context needs to be understood, because President Xi stuck to that same peaceful reunification theme, although he did put it a little bit on steroids. So we must understand that broader context when we discuss this.
I do appreciate you clarifying that and bringing that up. Saurabh Gupta, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.